The diner was quiet that morning, the kind of stillness that made the clinking of coffee cups sound almost too loud. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, catching on the chrome edges of the tables and bouncing off the glass salt shakers. At the corner booth sat Walter Branson, an 81-year-old Korean War veteran, who came here every morning at exactly 8:15. He wore his favorite flannel shirt, faded at the elbows, and a pair of heavy boots that had seen more winters than most men in the room had lived through. His hands shook slightly as he lifted his cup of black coffee, but his eyes, though tired, carried the quiet dignity of a man who had once stared down fear in battle. But that quiet morning was shattered in an instant. A younger man, broad-shouldered and mean-eyed, had been arguing with the waitress about his bill. His voice grew louder, his temper hotter, until he turned and noticed Walter watching quietly from his booth. Something about the old man's steady gaze, his calm presence, must have pricked the thug's fragile pride. Before anyone could stop it, he stormed over and struck Walter across the face. The sound echoed through the diner like a gunshot. Cups rattled. People froze. And Walter, his cheek burning red, simply raised his hand to his face, stunned not by the pain but by the cruelty of it. If you believe in kindness, in respect for those who came before us, and in the power of second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps spread these powerful stories of humanity. The diner fell into a heavy silence. The waitress, trembling, begged the men to leave, while the other customers looked down at their plates, too afraid to intervene. Walter didn't retaliate. He simply sat there, his weathered hand covering the fresh bruise, his eyes staring into the coffee he could no longer taste. He wasn't afraid for himself, he had endured far worse, but his heart ached at the state of the world, at how quickly respect seemed to vanish in the face of arrogance. Minutes turned into an hour. Walter stayed at his booth, partly because his legs felt too heavy to carry him out, and partly because he had nowhere else to be. The diner was his refuge, the place where he was known simply as Mr. Branson, the polite old man who always tipped generously, even when his pension was thin. Now, even that sanctuary had been tainted by violence. But then the bell above the diner's door jingled, and in walked a group of men whose very presence shifted the atmosphere. Leather vests stitched with bold insignias, tattoos winding down muscled arms, boots that hit the floor with certainty, they were members of the Hell's Angels. At their center walked a man taller than the rest, his gray-streaked beard giving him an air of authority. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Walter. And in that moment, a ripple of recognition passed through the old man's tired expression. The leader of the group was Thomas Branson, Walter's son. The thug who had struck Walter was still in the diner, smugly chatting with a friend near the counter, unaware of what was about to unfold. But Thomas saw the bruise on his father's face instantly, and his jaw clenched. The other bikers noticed too. The room held its breath, unsure whether violence would erupt again. But Thomas didn't charge forward. He walked slowly, deliberately, to his father's booth, sat down across from him, and placed a calloused hand over Walter's trembling one. The two men sat in silence for a long moment, the bond between them unspoken but unmistakable. Walter, who had once held his son as a crying boy in his arms, now looked at the men he had become, fierce, loyal, unyielding. For years, Thomas had been estranged from him, his path into the biker world one Walter struggled to understand. But here, in this diner, the years of distance didn't matter. Blood did. The thug finally noticed the newcomers and laughed. "What, you need your gang to protect you, old man," he sneered, standing up and puffing out his chest. The room tensed again, but Thomas remained seated, his gaze steady as stone. The other bikers stood behind him, silent, their presence enough to make even the bravest man reconsider his actions. Then Thomas spoke, his voice low but firm, every syllable dripping with authority. "That man you laid your hand on is my father. He's an 81-year-old veteran who gave more for this country than you ever will. And you thought it was tough to slap him." The thug's grin faltered. Suddenly, the weight of the room pressed down on him, the stares of the customers, the silence of the bikers, the quiet strength of the old man he had struck. Thomas didn't raise his fist. He didn't need to. His words alone carried a force greater than any punch. Slowly, the thug backed away, muttering something under his breath, before fleeing out the diner's door. No one followed him. There was no need. His shame would follow him farther than any man could. Walter finally exhaled, the tension leaving his body. For the first time that morning, he allowed himself a small, weary smile. His son had defended him, not with violence, but with loyalty and respect. The bond that had been strained for so many years seemed to heal in that simple act. The waitress brought fresh coffee for the table, her hands still shaking, and quietly thanked Thomas and the others. Around the diner, customers began to murmur, the fear lifting as though sunlight had broken through heavy clouds. Some even approached Walter to offer words of respect, ashamed they hadn't acted sooner. Walter looked at his son, his voice raspy but steady as he said, "I fought battles long ago, Thomas. But nothing compares to the fight of keeping your family close." Thomas nodded, emotion flickering in his tough exterior. For all the years they had drifted apart, this moment had reminded them both of what truly mattered. From that day forward, the diner became more than a place for breakfast. It became a symbol of reconciliation. Walter and Thomas would meet there often, sometimes joined by Thomas's biker brothers, who treated the veteran with a reverence he had never asked for but deeply appreciated. And every time Walter entered, people remembered that morning, when a thug's cruelty was silenced not by fists, but by the quiet power of family and respect. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by liking this video, subscribing to Kindness Corner, and sharing it with others. These stories remind us that no matter how broken the world feels, acts of love and loyalty can mend what's been lost. And before we end, I'd love for you to comment below, do you believe kindness has the power to heal broken families? Your words might inspire someone who needs hope today. Walter Branson lived out his days with a renewed sense of peace, no longer just the lonely veteran at the corner booth, but a father who found his son again in the unlikeliest of places. And to everyone who witnessed it, that diner became a reminder that even in the face of cruelty, respect, loyalty, and love will always carry the greatest strength.